Millions and millions of people coming in illegally, and they're coming from places unknown, and they're rough people, in many cases from jails, prisons, from mental institutions, insane asylums. You know, insane asylum, that's Silence of the Lambs stuff. Hannibal Lecter, anybody know Hannibal Lecter? We don't want him in this country. You know, where people are coming from parts unknown, countries that you've never heard of, languages that nobody in this country speaks. You know, we don't even have teachers of some of these languages. Who would think that? We have languages that are like from the planet Mars. Nobody knows how to, you know, speak it.
I have been trying for some time to understand why Donald Trump has all of a sudden gotten on this train of there's languages that nobody understands. And I really do think that it comes down to not like 4chan conspiracies or whatever. I think it's just he is no longer able to understand some of the words that he hears. And rather, as always is the case, rather than consider the possibility that he is the one with the problem, he instead puts it out onto the world and we all have to suffer as a result. So according to Trump, former president, perhaps next president, there are migrants coming in who speak languages that nobody has ever heard. They're coming from places we don't even know. And I mean, how in the end would you find out? Would you ask the migrant where they're coming from? That's crazy. Of course, you couldn't do that. And so I guess the languages are coming from Mars. And that wasn't even the craziest stuff. He literally mentioned Hannibal Lecter. Okay, Silence of the Lambs. And did you notice that in that ridiculous like facade of an interview that RBSN did, that every single thing he said, the audience laughed, even though it wasn't like a joke? Like he referenced Silence of the Lambs and they all laughed. What was the joke in the Silence of the Lambs? Is it just that I don't automatically associate, oh, crazy psychopaths, that's migrants, that's funny, the idea. Maybe they're killers, maybe they're cannibals, that's comedy gold. Maybe that just doesn't naturally fit into my brain in a way that it clearly did for them without needing any other explanation. They laughed even about the planet Mars thing. These people are twisted, deranged. You know what they speak? Mostly Spanish. That's mostly what people coming across the border are speaking are Spanish. And I think there's some people who actually understand it. You know, there might be some other languages. There might be some people that speak like Hindi or something like that. Maybe there's some Portuguese coming across the border. All of these, even for me as a non-expert, conceivable. I can hold within the capacity of my skull the idea that people would speak these languages, but for them, no. The fact that Donald Trump has all of a sudden decided that in every public appearance, he's gonna mention the fact that nobody knows what language they're speaking is not only understandable to them, it's compelling to them. They like the idea that these people come from effectively nowhere. It's not a place, because places have domestic situations. They have perhaps explanations as to why a person might want to leave. In fact, if one were to dig deep enough and care enough to understand the history, it might be that in some of these places, perhaps America had an effect on the domestic politics of that country, the economy, the military situation, the government situation of those countries. Maybe we even bear some blame for the situation that led to people wanting to flee. But doesn't that make you uncomfortable to even consider? Isn't it easier to just think they come from nowhere? They come from the bottom of the ocean. They come from Mars. They come from the nega realm. Because then, of course, you don't have to do any thinking. You don't have to do any understanding. You don't have to see them as people. They are literally aliens now. It's not enough to use that term. Now they actually come from Mars. And they're speaking all of these languages that we don't know, even though apparently, and I'm actually shocked to find this out, people within the United States communicate in up to 350 different languages, according to the US Census Bureau. I have a feeling most of the people crossing the border fit into that 350. But anyway, I just sort of passed quickly over the Hannibal Lecter thing, which is utterly bizarre. The only thing more bizarre than referencing Silence of the Lambs in a conversation about desperate migrants trying to find a better life for themselves is the fact that it's not the first time he's made that reference. Take a look at this.
Silence of the Lamb, you know what that is? Has anybody seen Silence of the Lambs? Hannibal Lecter, how great an actor was he? You know why I like him? Because he said on television on one of the, I love Donald Trump, so I love him. I love him. I love him. He said that a long time ago, and once he said that, he was in my camp. I was in his camp. Yeah, I don't care if he was the worst actor. I'd say he was great to me.
So weird. So weird to not just think that. Okay, maybe you think that. Maybe you're a shallow, vain person who is desperate for acceptance. Desperate especially to have someone who is on the glowing box in front of you say that you're good. This guy, Donald Trump, who loves to say that he hates Hollywood. He hates all the pop culture. He hates absolutely all of it. And simultaneously is endlessly desperate for the acceptance of this world that he pretends to hate. So all they have to do is say that they like him, and suddenly he loves them. It is one thing to be that way, to actually think that way, and I believe that he does. I mean, it's not just actors. We see that with politicians. You have people who are incredibly critical of him, who now are running for Senate or whatever, and they say that Trump's great, and he hugs them to himself. Like, he is that easy to manipulate. He's easier to win over with fake praise than the dragons of fantasy stories. He's a parody of himself, but I believe that that's the way he is. It is a totally different thing to constantly tell audiences that that's the way you think. And it was, you saw it there with the Hannibal Lecter thing, and the Anthony Hopkins. But over the weekend, he said the same thing about, I think it was about some politician that, he'd heard that they like him, so all of a sudden he just loves him. Oh no, actually it was the leader of Argentina said that he liked MAGA, so I love him. And like, he just says it. I don't care who they are or what they've done. They've praised me, so I love them. And the audience is like, yes, this is the way the guy with the nukes should behave. And they love it. I don't understand it. I don't get the Hannibal Lecter thing. I would say, as critical as I might be and have been so far on the show of him trying to connect in people's minds these desperate migrants who just want to get to a place where they can have a job, build a life, not be killed. They're psychopathic killers and maybe cannibals. It's sick of him to make that connection. But on a certain level though, have I not often just like watched a thing and all of a sudden I can't stop working it into political conversations? That's really what he's doing here. I don't think he's like thinking back to when he saw Silence of the Lambs in 1985. I think he watched it like 3 weeks ago. And I think now he can't stop talking about it. And I've certainly been guilty of that myself. But that said, there is one other excerpt from the interview that I think it's important that you see. So why don't we roll this?
They put the students in the place of our students, like in New York City. We have these wonderful students. They're going to school. All of a sudden, they no longer have a seat. They're no longer invited to the school. We're putting migrants in who don't speak the language. They have no idea what the teacher's saying. And we have children that are no longer going to school. They're throwing them out of the park. There's no more little leagues. There's no more sports. There's no more life in New York and so many of these cities.
Is that really accelerated quickly from someone being bumped out of a chair to there's no more life in New York. If only there was a way we could check, if we could see if there are still things that are living and moving, breathing in New York. But this is how you fear-monger conservatives. I'm not even saying this to my audience. I'm saying this to the next wannabe Trumps who are waiting in the wings for him to finally croak on the toilet thanks to the 3 McDoubles that he just downed. This is how you do it. You don't demonize in a rational way. You say utterly unfounded, insane things. And you say it with such confidence that it is utterly irrelevant whether someone like me fact checks it. Like if I were to point out that kids still go to school in New York, it doesn't matter. Trump said that they don't, so they don't. If you were to say that like Little League doesn't exist, that might come as a bit of a shock to all of the people actively playing in Little League in New York, like last weekend and next weekend, but it doesn't matter again because he said that they didn't. And you might think, well, okay, if I believe everything that Donald Trump just said, that migrants have come into New York, which by the way, we're shipped there from southern states, but I guess you're not supposed to be mad about that. You're just supposed to be mad about the migrants, regardless of how they got there. They're taking kids out of school who now don't get to go to school. It's literally untrue. There's not a single example of that happening. But if you believed it, you might think, well, perhaps we should fund the schools. Perhaps we should fund Little League. Perhaps we should build more baseball stadiums, or as he said in a recent interview, knocker fields. Maybe we should build more fields for knockers. But of course, he doesn't actually mean that, and that's not the way that it's going to be received. It never is. When they spent the past couple of years demonizing how the mere existence of trans people was an existential threat to women's sports, it never, over the course of years, despite how much they focused on it, it never extended beyond trans people should not be allowed to engage in sports. There was never a call for funding. There was never renewed interest in the events. There was never a crowdsourced campaign to make sure that every single time high school girls meet in sport to compete, there isn't a single empty seat there. It never happened because Trump talks, and the talk is flavored around different subjects, but the subjects are always utterly irrelevant. It doesn't matter. He flavors one speech as being about school or about sports or about the border, but nobody truly cares. That's simply the plate that the dish is resting on, and the dish is othering, demonizing. It's xenophobia. That's what it's there for. And he might pretend briefly to care about languages or schools or knockers or whatever it is, but he doesn't. And he'll move on to a different topic. And all of the people who are cheering along the way, they're not gonna even like experience a brief moment of whiplash of, wait, I thought we were pretending to care about that for a while. That's the way the grift works. It's a lesson for any other Republicans who might be watching this.